Everton 2, Fulham 0. Everton have won a game after only one win in their previous 8. But to understand how this was achieved, we need to talk about some of the changes David Moyes made to the starting lineup, but also to the tactics, how Everton avoided falling into the same traps as they did against Sunderland, and why some of the changes made to this team must be made permanent. Let's talk about the team, because this is how both teams lined up. The big change obviously being Tim Idabunim coming into midfield, Jake O'Brien losing his place for James Garner to then slot in at right back. And this affected the team in a quite positive way, which I'm going to talk about in a second. But from an Everton perspective, pretty positive, with David Moyes recognising that against Sunderland there were problems in build-up, and this did address them. We're going to talk about it in a second. One thing that was surprising to me was the admission of Merlin role, but Tim Idabunim did do okay, and you can't really have complaints after coming away with that 2-0 win. Now, for how this looked on the pitch, there was actually quite a lot of movement from Everton's midfield, something that is quite surprising to me given how structured we are under Moyes. But that 4-2-3-1 we just looked at on the tactics board didn't actually look like that on the pitch at times, because on the ball here is Dewsbury-Hall, the deepest midfielder out of every Everton midfielder, and then we have Tim here, also in midfield. But where is Idrissa Gueye? You'd expect him to be here, but that's not Idrissa Gueye. That's Iliman Ndiaye. Idrissa Gueye is actually all the way up here on the right wing. These three midfielders, Tim, Idrissa Gueye, and Dewsbury-Hall, all moved about in the opening exchanges. And this frequent movement of the midfielders from Everton did cause Fulham problems, because they didn't know whether to man-mark Everton's midfielders, defend the space, or press them. Because you can see here, Sasha Lukic is now pressing Dewsbury-Hall, because in theory, Dewsbury-Hall is the most attacking of Everton's midfielders. But in doing so, Iliman Ndiaye is all alone, and in theory is open for this pass right here. And this did cause problems for Fulham, with Sasha Lukic receiving a booking very early on for stopping an attack, and then probably should have been sent off for a foul on Dewsbury-Hall later on in the half. And Everton's midfield did cause problems for Fulham in how they went into different spaces you wouldn't really expect them to be. You can see here, Tim is the deepest, Iliman Ndiaye is in the middle, Garner is all the way on the right wing, and that's dragged out a Fulham defender to him, making space for Tieno Barry to then attack. And the good thing about this is, another change in the team, is that you have James Garner on the ball, a player that will look for these passes in behind. You can see here, he's got his head up, he is looking for this pass, and that did come off a few times. Calvin Bassey from Fulham did have a good battle with Tieno Barry, and with Bassey having that Premier League experience, a lot of the time it did go Bassey's way, but when it went Tieno Barry's way, it was a very effective for Everton at getting up the pitch. And from a build-up perspective, it did really allow Everton to move up the pitch, because all of the Fulham players are so concerned about Everton's midfielders. You can see here, look how many Fulham players are in a central area, all concerned about Everton's three players in the middle, meaning that James Tarkowski has loads of space just to drive the ball into, move the ball up the pitch, pen Fulham back into their own box. And all of these Everton midfielders moving into spaces all the time in different areas meant that Fulham became extremely constricted in the middle of the pitch. And that meant a lot of Fulham's midfielders did eventually get sucked into the middle when James Tarkowski had the ball, causing them to be extremely narrow when Everton were building out, meaning that spaces out wide did occur. And when the middle is so constricted and lacking of space, it does mean that spaces do appear in other parts of the pitch. And James Tarkowski and Michael Keane both looked for these passes out wide direct into the wingers, because they often had 1v1 scenarios against their fullbacks, and it worked extremely well. But at 0-0, there was still tension of which way the game would go. Despite Everton having early chances and doing really well, it did have that feeling that Fulham may sneak a goal, and that goal would probably have come through this man right here, Kevin. As the left winger, he's excellent 1v1. We know that James Garner isn't necessarily a right back. He can play there and is good defensively, but against a winger with this type of pace, it is a dangerous game. And the way that Fulham made sure that Kevin had James Garner 1v1 was through the use of Ryan Sessegnon, the left back. As a left back, you don't really expect him to be here, making an inverted run through the middle. That's because Fulham were aiming to try and drag Iliman Ndiaye towards Sessegnon, making James Garner's role harder because he had to defend 1v1 against Kevin. Fortunately, we got away with it. Well, not necessarily got away with it, because we did really well to prevent them having those opportunities. In the second half especially, Anderson Fulham centre-back would look to play those direct balls into Kevin, but they were often overhit or Everton cut it out really well. And Fulham doubled down on this because on the ball here is not Sessegnon and it's not Kevin. It's actually the centre-back, the left centre-back in a back four, Calvin Bassey, who's made that run to drive Everton back. You can see here Everton have committed several bodies into trying to prevent any progression down that side. And that was a worry because if Fulham managed to successfully drag many Everton players out to that right-hand side, or their left-hand side, it would mean that spaces would occur in other parts of the pitch. And with Fulham having the technical players like Iwobi, Harry Wilson, which isn't in shot, it could have been a worry if Fulham were able to evade the press in any sort of coherent way. And this is how they did it, with Calvin Bassey often driving out from the back, beating that first line of pressure, which came from Tieno Bari the most time, with Sessegnon in the middle in somewhere you would not expect a left back to be. Meanwhile, Kevin has chalk on his boots, hugging the touchline, looking to receive that pass so he can then run it into space. But Everton dealt with it, and that's good. But how did they deal with it, and why was one player crucial in all of this? Well, the answer is this man right here, Keenan Dewsbury-Hall, a player that I think has got a lot of stick in the last few weeks, but what goes unnoticed, maybe his final ball isn't always the best, but this work right here is exactly why he's needed in this team. Against Fulham, he made 6 tackles. As a number 10, as an attacking midfielder, for you to be making 6 tackles is absolutely outrageous. But even when he didn't tackle, his understanding of how to close off passing lanes and make interceptions and put Fulham under pressure ultimately negated the way they got up the pitch. And he was absolutely ideal at this throughout the entire game. Now we need to talk about this man right here, James Garner, and what does he offer as a right back? Because obviously he prefers to play in the centre of the park. He's got a great passing range on him, got an even better shot on him, which we've discovered in the last 6 months. But what does he offer at right back, and why could it be a permanent solution for Everton? When he's on the ball, a common theme in Everton's play is that Tieno Bari does move to the same side as the ball is on, and Jai also goes over here, and they look to double up on the left back because James Garner, as a centre midfielder playing right back, will look to play these direct passes in behind or to feet. But the premise of it is that Barry, as a 6'5" striker, will have a physical advantage on a left back. Well, most left backs in this league, unless you're playing Man City. And when Everton did do this, it often meant we dragged out Calvin Bassey, the centre back, into these positions. A centre-back does not want to be defending in these positions. As a former left-back, he will probably be somewhat more comfortable than others would be, but as a whole, they don't really want to do it. And in these moments, because they're not central and they know there's space behind them and they're in an uncomfortable position, they do tend to give away fouls, and that's what happened here with Tieno Bari winning a free kick after a pass that came all the way from Everton's half through James Garner. And it's such an effective yet simple way of getting up the pitch, and a good use of Barry, who does have those good touches in him. Next, we have someone we haven't really talked about for a couple of weeks because he's been quite quiet. He scored against Palace, but since then, the performances maybe have got a little bit of flack from, well, online mainly, because I think people who go to the games understand that this man here, right here, Jack Grealish, does have quality and does improve Everton. Everton scored 5 goals in this game. Let's not kid ourselves. We scored 5. Okay, 3 of them were offside. Fair enough. But this man, Jack Grealish, had a hand in all 3 of them. You can see here what we talked about earlier about Grealish being able to isolate his defender and get into these positions in the box where Kenny Tete, who isn't that bad 1v1 defensively, is now frightened for his life because he has to back off whilst Grealish goes and continues to carry the ball into dangerous areas. But it's a good move nonetheless, and does show that we have that ability to attack in the final third and not just hope for things to happen. And an important thing to note from this disallowed goal is this is Idrissa in that right wing position we looked at earlier, position he would never have been last year. And the first disallowed goal does come from this, with the ball being switched over to the other side, with Iliman Ndiaye waiting in the box, also Tieno Bari waiting in the box. Both of them were offside, but as we discussed earlier, Idrissa Gana Gueye is in that right wing position, in a position that Fulham don't expect him to be in, so they're not looking for him there, meaning that he does have time to get a ball into the box. And on another day, this could have been onside. Obviously, both of these are offside, but good chance creation nonetheless. James Tarkowski is there waiting for it. Obviously, we know he's offside now, but great finish after a knockdown from Michael Keane, who did actually go on to get a goal himself. And then the Jack Grealish theme continues with him being on the edge of the box, on the corner of the box where he wants to be, supported by Dewsbury-Hall, who is absolutely relentless in his attack of the wide areas and the half spaces in this game. Well, Jack Grealish here is putting the ball into the box. And as it got closer to half time, we really did grow into the game. Garner's got the ball here and is attracting players to him. Sanderberg is running away, but is still looking at Garner because he's not really sure where the ball's going to go. But look at this. Garner's calmness and Everton's ability just to keep one as a defensive midfielder has resulted in space for Tim Igbunam and Dewsbury-Hall to be in, meaning that central passes through the middle do become possible, meaning that we don't have to look for Grealish all the time and become very predictable in how we look to score goals. Speaking of goals, here's one of them. Jack Grealish has got the ball here in a similar position to what we just saw, maybe a bit deeper this time, but to his left, he's supported by Mykolenko, and to his right, he's supported by Idrissa Gana Gueye. The importance of this, I can't stress enough, because of these players helping Jack Grealish, it means that Fulham can't really double up on him without leaving a spare man, because the Fulham players are concerned about this, and they're concerned about this, meaning that nobody's going to come over to help Harry Wilson defend Grealish, especially not him. And then after a bit of pinball, we do get the goal. Idrissa Gana Gueye is not pretty, but a goal is a goal. And look at the time in the top left of the screen. It's just before halftime. A great time to score, but with what we learned against Sunderland, a very dangerous thing, apparently, with how slowly we start second half. But it was worrying because straight away, you can see their top left-hand side. This is the time Sunderland scored in the previous game, and Everton have already begun to sat off, despite having 45 minutes plus added time more to play. And it was quite worrying from my perspective because it felt like we hadn't learned anything from the previous game that happened only 5 short days ago. But I can't stress to you enough how important this action from Dewsbury-Hall is. Because you can see here, he is being proactive in his search to get the ball back. He's closing off passing lanes in the process. Let me show you. Because he's coming from this direction, it's forcing Anderson to pass laterally to his right rather than passing into midfield into Sanderberg. And that's a big part of what Everton are looking to do here. They're looking to set traps, forcing passes like this, meaning that they can then press from wide areas, force Fulham to play again all the way out wide, keeping those central areas as quiet as possible. And it really did work well because Fulham were then short for ideas. Obviously, Sessegnon, the player we spoke about earlier, has moved from left back into this half space position, meaning that Alexander Iwobi has now dropped into a left back position to get the ball, because he wants to keep things moving, because he wasn't getting the ball in the central area because of how Everton pressed. But look at this from Dewsbury-Hall. He's already instructing his teammates where the ball might go, which spaces to shut off, and so is Garner. It's really good to see. It shows that these players really do understand how they've been asked to press. And realistically, Iwobi's got the ball here, but there's no option in terms of short pass forward. It has to go backwards. It has to go here, to then go here, to then go here. And by that point, Everton have pressed you. You may have to then pass back to the goalkeeper, nullifying what could have been a Fulham attack or ultimately preventing their build-up play in totality. And as the second half moved on, Everton did go on to press even better. Look, Sessegnon is now dropped all the way here to receive the ball. And look, he's got his back in an uncomfortable position. And Jai is being very proactive in his press, meaning that Sessegnon receiving the ball in that position is going to be very, very difficult for him to open out before Njai comes in and takes you out or gets the ball, or both. And because Sessegnon has got quite a closed off body here, it means that he can't come this way, meaning that he had to go back inside and play dangerous balls, and that led to Everton further pressing and then getting this long throw. And we scored a goal from this. It was offside, but we scored a goal. And ultimately, it was a shame because it was marginal. Tieno Barry didn't really touch the ball. Obviously, we've been disallowed a goal against Tottenham already this season for this rule. It's good to see some consistency, but it's very annoying when it happens to you. And there's one player that came on in the second half that I really do need to give some flowers to. It was this man right here, Merlin Roll, a player that I spoke exclusively about last week, making a whole video on him, about this very thing. How he moves into wide areas despite actually being a centre midfielder. And this strong running, accompanied by Beto's good hold of play beforehand, results in an Everton corner. And from that, Everton score, make it 2-0. Moyes using his substitutes at a good time has been quite a divisive topic for Everton this season because at times they've been questionable, but in this game, Beto and Roll both combined to get Everton out of danger up the pitch when we didn't really look like creating much. And from that, we won a corner to make it 2-0 and we won the game.